My first question to you, Shahidul Islam Saab, that base Shahidul Alam Saab, that Sheikh Hasina is now gone. So what is the future now for Bangladesh? Is there going to be the interim government for long, or you think that there are going to be elections fairly soon?
Certainly, we would aspire to have elections as quickly as practicable. But this is an unexpected situation. I mean, Hasina had entrenched herself so well into the system. I mean, she had complete control of the military, of the judiciary, of the bureaucracy, of the police. We were frankly very surprised that it happened as quickly as it did. Let me just describe the practical aspects. We were walking towards the big protest, braving curfew on the 5th, and we were being shot at. So 3 of our group got bullet wounds. We put them in hospital. We then tried to find a way around to Shahbag, where it was happening. This would have been about 20 minutes. And by the time we arrived at Shahbag, people were celebrating. It was as sudden as that. So obviously, we were not prepared in that same way. And a transition of this sort is not easy. It needs to be managed. At the moment, one of the problems we have is that we do not have a head of government right now. Professor Yunus who has been selected as the new head of government, will be arriving tomorrow at 10 past 2. And hopefully he will take over very, very quickly. But there's a whole lot of other things to do. The fact is, as soon as it happened, so many of the people who were part of the tyrant's regime have now gone underground. And while we're happy to get rid of them, the fact that we now have a vacuum in administration is something that needs to be managed. And now it's very important that we manage this transition peacefully, without violence, without retribution. And those are difficult things to do. But having said that, I think what the students have already done is quite admirable. I was yesterday coming in and I looked at the roads being well managed, none of the chaos we're usually used to. And the students have been making very responsible statements about maintaining law and order, about not taking revenge, about working constructively towards nation building. If we can follow it through, that'll be fantastic. But I don't think we're in an illusion. This is a difficult period which needs to be well managed.
So from what you're saying, it's still very unclear what's going to happen next. And I think that is the real big question. But what you have described is the kind of violence that Sheikh Hasina's rule had inflicted, especially on your colleagues and you. I know that you personally suffered during Sheikh Hasina's rule. Khushi Kabir, coming to you, you have always spoken for the rights of the minorities. What state is the minorities is now? Because we are getting reports that temples have been attacked, Hindu temples have been attacked, that Hindu businesses and properties have been attacked. What is happening in Bangladesh on the streets at the moment?
So I think when Shahidul mentioned that there's a sort of a lapse now, a gap. I wouldn't say lapse, it's a gap. There is a total lack of a presence and in the field, and especially in the villages and even in the towns. So this has led to attack on people who are perceived to be Awami Leaguers. It's not uniform everywhere, but it is happening, and there's a fear. It has been on minorities, not just Hindu minorities, Christian minorities, Ahmadiyyas, others who are more marginalized, indigenous communities in the northern plainlands who are very poor. So there have been these sporadic attacks and violence and arson. And in Dhaka itself, on the day immediately after the army general mentioned that he's taking over, we didn't see that his taking over really meant, because it was total, and there is, at a time like this when then suddenly people have been on the streets, they've been shot at, I mean over 300, and that's supposed to be a conservative estimate, have been shot within this 1 month. And so many people are injured. So many people have been picked up from their homes. There was a total fear. So suddenly when there's this release, there's bound to be a mob lynching and attack. And I don't see, which is something that the army should have done, is being in control over certain places, especially like our parliament building. And they were not there, so there was a lot of lawlessness, which still continues. Even today, I'm getting news from different places. So it is not, I mean, the narrative is being given is just the Hindus. It's not the Hindus. It's all very
It's general chaos.
marginalized.
It's general chaos.
Especially with the marginalized communities who will not be able to fight back. So there's fear. Last night, all over Mohammadpur, there was ransacking, looting.
But Khushi Kabir, allow me to ask you, from what you're saying is that it appears that the army has been unable to control the rioting.
I won't say unable. I don't see their presence on the streets at all.
And you're concerned about that. Shahidul Alam Saab.
Well, I'm not concerned about the army not being there. I'm concerned about the lawlessness. That's all.
Right.
I mean, if they were not there and there was no lawlessness, I wouldn't have had any problems.
Yes. Shahidul Alam Saab, why is it that the army is not out on the streets? Is it because they don't want to be seen to be stopping the protesters? And now what will be the army's role in this new dispensation, which is going to be led by Muhammad Yunus?
Well, I'd like to go back a little bit. In a sense, for me, the euphoria was certainly the most dominant feeling. I mean, I have not seen people celebrating like this since 1971, since we became independent from Pakistan. So that was a huge thing. And this tyrant has been there for a very, very long time and has done some very, very bad things. There are a huge number of people who have extreme anger at what has happened, and this is a pent-up anger which is now being released. That is not unexpected. The fact that we do not suddenly have, because there was not that smooth transition which should have taken place, and that the tyrant was allowed to escape to India was part of the problem. Had there been a smooth transition, I think this might not have been quite the same. But yes, it is true that there is that level of lawlessness that people have talked about. Professor Yunus is coming in tomorrow. He will take oath. We will have a government in place. We will then have a cabinet in place. Also, what has happened is a lot of the people at the top of the state institutions have gone underground. So you have a lot of state institutions which are currently headless. So they're not being able to perform. A lot of police.
But allow me to ask you that the government that will be led by Professor Muhammad Yunus, is it going to be there for a long time, do you think? And is there, will there be an acceptability of it if it's there for a long time? Or are you seeing elections coming up very soon, that the people will want elections?
The aspiration is that there be elections. I mean, of course, we want an elected democratic government. We also do not want a return to the dynasty politics that has plagued our country for so long. So this is a sea change we are after. But,
right.
I mean, to be practical, an election and setting up a government is not something that you do just by pressing a tap. That process has to begin. For an election to take place, there is a period preceding the election, and there are things that have to be done. So I'm not really sure what time that mechanism will take. I'm hopeful that it will happen quickly, and we certainly do not want a caretaker government to stay any longer than it absolutely has to in order to have that smooth transition.
All right. Khushi
that
Kabir,
is what
right.
it's after, but
right.
At the end of the day, first we have to prevent what we were talking about, the lawlessness. We have to ensure trust. We have to ensure stability.
Right.
And alongside that, do all the other things that need to happen.
Khushi Kabir, do you agree? Is there a desire to have the caretaker government stay for longer amongst the people, or do they want a quick election? And what will these elections mean? Does it mean that the Awami League will be able to participate in these elections?
Okay, that's a very critical question.
Sorry, go on, Khalid.
Yes, Khushi.
Khushi, off to
It's
you.
a very critical question, and I thank you for asking this question. But first, I'd like to say that, for us, what was troubling is we can understand when the looting and the attack and the arson is against the people who are with the Awami League. But when it's with the marginalized and the poorest communities in the villages, the ones who are the most vulnerable, that's when my question gets I raise that question as to there should be someone. The army said they're in control, so they're obviously not. Now we are happy that there's going to be a
Caretaker
government,
right?
A caretaker government. They're calling it interim government. So they're calling it an interim government, and I think Dr. Yunus has the respect of most people. He's run institutions. He's somebody who people respect, but also he has been a member of an advisor of a caretaker government in 1996. At that time, he has not just the experience of running a huge institution, which he has. It's a huge, huge institution, the whole Grameen and the Yunus Center, etc. But he also has had experience with the government, even if that was for 3 months. Now, to answer to your question is, I think people are relieved and they want this government to be formed as fast as possible, because no one wants the kind of lawlessness that is going on. We cannot reach the army and say that this is what is happening, we want your intervention. When people call us and tell us this is what is happening and we want to call, we don't have anyone to call to. So I just will say that the sooner the caretaker government comes into power, it's good. Then they, of course, have this whole thing of trying to take control of what is happening, keeping the administration and the government going.
But what about the Awami League? Will they be allowed to take part in the elections?
I doubt they will take part in the elections. I don't know. It depends very much on how the caretaker government handles the situation. At the current situation, I don't see them taking part.
Right.
They're all undercover. But I would just say one thing, is that in 1990, when there was a big movement or the overthrow of General Ershad, the dictator, after 8 years, there was a smooth transition and takeover, because there was a system in place where there was not this kind of rioting and looting and burning and arson. So I hope once the caretaker is taken over, because Ershad gave it, when he left, it was a caretaker government. There was no army. So now we would not like the army to be in place, because we've seen the army when Ershad came into power, when General Zia came into power, they stayed on for years. They stayed on for years, even they were supposed to be there for 6 months. So we do hope that this is a civilian caretaker government. It's not run by the army. The army is not heading it. There's no martial law in the country. So we sincerely hope, and because the students have been in the movement and it's the students who were in the forefront, we hope that the army will not have much of a role.
All right. Well, that brings me to many more questions. Bear with me.